The Industrial Revolution was one of the most rapid and profound economic revolutions any country had ever experienced. It replaced traditional manual labor into machine factory labor. The first presence of the revolution took place in Great Britain during the last half of the 18th century. Inventions such as the steam engine transformed small villages into factory-based communities. The combination of mass production and factory labor made England's economy soar. Other European nations, such as Germany and France, wanted to duplicate Britain's success and try factory-based production. The Industrial Revolution then unfolded in the United States. America had the raw materials, the landmass, and fertile soil far beyond any European nation. The progress of the Revolution was most noticeable in the northern states. Americans had to quickly adapt from an agrarian lifestyle to an urban one in order to cope with the rapid change. In Europe, famine and oppression made immigrants come to America and join in on the Revolution, along with a new life. Having the influx of immigrants made it possible for big business owners to have good, cheap, hard-working laborers to do the work. Men like Andrew Carnegie and Cornelius Vanderbilt had a steel and railroad empire that was unbeatable. These men had monopolized these two and made a fortune along with connecting a railroad system from the East Coast to the West. When these railroads had been completed, they met at a central hub. That hub was Chicago. This city was the site of lumber production in the early 1850s. The industry provided work for immigrant families, paying around $100 to $200 a year, including room and board. The construction of canals around Chicago that same year helped bring more commerce to the fast-growing area. By the late 1850s, Chicago became the central organization of products. Lumber was sent down from Minnesota to Chicago, along with pigs and livestock for the Mississippi Valley. In this time period, the first waves of immigration hit Chicago, including the Irish, Germans, Czechs, Lithuanians, and the Polish. The jobs available to these immigrants were working in meatpacking factories, clothing production, or iron and steel labor. During this time, an estimated 400,000 Czech immigrants came to America in search of jobs and prosperity. Chicago would become the third largest Czech-populated city next to Vienna and Prague. In Europe, Czechs were ruled under the Austrian Habsburg dynasty. Under their ruling, Czechs were oppressed. They were forced to learn German, become Catholic, and give up any Czech culture. Those who revolted were exiled or executed. Czech writers and intellects began working to create a national consciousness. Leaders from Bohemian Hungary established parliamentary documents called the March Laws of 1848. The reform documents did not sit well with the current empire, so they instead crushed the revolt and claimed Hungary to create the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. After being fed up with the loss of establishing a nation, Czechs and Bohemians immigrated to the United States. Those who left were considered to be anarchists. These people moved to Midwestern states, while others immigrated to cities such as Chicago to work in factories and lumber yards for perceived good pay. In reality, Czechs had earned less than any other major ethnic group in the city. They were not shy to participate in strikes for higher pay, better working conditions, and normal working hours. Most Czechs lived near where they worked, making protesting meaningful and convenient. While living in their neighborhoods, they established their own churches, free-thinking schools, and fraternal clubs called Sokol. This club promoted Czech nationalism and helped preserve their culture and heritage. In 1871, the Great Chicago Fire destroyed a third of the city and reluctantly burned north of the Czech neighborhoods. This resulted in many homeless Chicagoans who needed a place to live. Czechs began to rent out their homes to make profit from this disaster. Factories had to also relocate to the predominantly Czech area, and hiring locals was a matter of convenience. During the late 1880s and 1890s, they began to establish more organizations such as the Czechoslovak Protection Society that helped injured workers and their families recoup and receive support. It also was a place where Czech men would come and socialize. Many Czech laborers joined socialist labor parties and unions. They also became loyal to the Democratic Party because they supported socialist ideas for equality and better working conditions. The Czech people began to establish ethnic neighborhoods like Czech California on the city's west side. This middle-class neighborhood would resemble a place for their ethnic identity to flourish. Other areas of the city began to have an influx of Czech immigrants and Czech Americans. Suburbs such as Berwyn and Cicero were known for its heavy Czech population. 86% of Cicero's population were Czech. During this time, Western Electric expanded its facility to Cicero. and hired more than 40,000 workers who were Czech. They were known for having the largest number of Czech workers in the Chicago metropolitan area. Hawthorne Works plant was able to sustain a homogeneous workforce by involving itself in the community. This factory fostered to a working class group of people who then became successful from working for Western Electric. The Industrial Revolution depended on immigration labor to expand the growth of the cities and the economy. The city of Chicago and Czechoslovakians were a piece of the Industrial Revolution. Today, Chicago is one of the largest cities in the Midwest and is responsible for shipping and receiving of major imports from the West Coast to the East. Chicago is known for its multicultural backgrounds and ethnic-based communities. Today in Chicago, many of the organizations and churches the Czech community established are still around. Circles are still operating in Chicago and elsewhere in the United States, providing gymnastics and cultural aspects to all people. Churches such as St. Procopius was a predominantly Czech parish that is responsible for the establishment of Benedictine University and Benedict Academy. Czechs remained in politics with the example of Anton Cermak becoming mayor of Chicago, and recently Judy Bartopinka, who served as Illinois State Treasurer and ran for governor of Illinois, but lost to Rod Blagojevich. As you can see, this proves that the Czech community, which struggled during the Industrial Revolution, worked their way up to establish themselves in Chicago and continue to keep their heritage and culture intact.